morning, all. Happy Final Friday. Hello. Couldn't be more pleased to launch our Friday with a tremendous fellows reading. We're going to start today with Crystal Hana Kim. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I can't believe we're almost nearing the end. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Ooh, sorry. I'm really, excited to be here, and I wanted to thank Sewanee for having me. I'm going to be reading from my first novel, only novel, If You Leave Me, and this is a story that alternates between 5 characters that are growing up during and after the Korean War. And they are trying to forge new lives while the country itself is coming to terms with its new fractured existence. And the novel begins with Hemi, who is a 16-year-old refugee. She has to leave her home with her widowed brother and her widowed mother and her younger brother who's ill to a refugee camp in Busan. And when she's at the refugee camp, she meets Kyungwon, a childhood friend of hers who she didn't know where he was. And then she also meets Kyungwon's older, wealthier cousin from Seoul, Jisoo. And Hemi really wants things for herself. She wants things for her life. She wants an education, but she's also a woman who's living during this time under the duress of poverty and hunger and violence. So I used to read from the beginning, but I'm really sick of that now. So I'm going to be reading from the middle of the book. And in this section, it's actually 1963. So the Korean War has been over for 10 years. Hemi ended up marrying Jisoo, the older, wealthier one from Seoul, and Kyungwon, her childhood friend, goes to Seoul after the war to find work, and he doesn't see them for many years. In 1963, he decides to come back to see Hemi, Jisoo, and their 3 daughters, but he ends up leaving pretty abruptly. So I'm going to be reading from Hemi's perspective in that aftermath. So I'm going to lower this again because I'm on my tippy toes. Sorry. Okay. Hemi. I bled yesterday from the cuts on my hands, a careless knife. A week ago, tripping over the stones Mira had placed around the house in the shape of clouds. The sharp taste when I bit down on my tongue the morning Kyungwon had left, like the discarded sea ration tins we used to lick during the war. He had once dared me to touch the silver sharp edge with the tip of my tongue, a blood-red river. I paced the girls' room, trying to count the days since I had last bled between my legs. Mira, surrounded by colored pencils, mumbled at her picture. When I passed, she tugged at the hem of my hanbok skirt. I want a cookie. She held up a wet palmful of crumbs. More for me? Her hair, the oily stink of it, made me want to retch. I don't have any right now. My stomach roiled at the sudden flare of smells, grease, spit, boiled beef bones from the kitchen, a vile sweetness I couldn't place. The thought of the outhouse soured my spit, too. Mommy needs to go outside. Mira grabbed my leg. Take me. Sitting at my feet, she looked tiny, my youngest, a dreamer. I must have been dreaming, too. Months since I had bled. Mommy? Mira toddled after me. I staggered to the tree in the backyard and retched green potato sprigs and white rice, my early breakfast. The acid stench so nauseating I had to lean against the stone wall. The air itself seemed to knock me unsteady. I slid to the ground. Mira wrinkled her nose and hid her face behind her hands. Mommy sick? Shush, please. I laid my cheek against the cool stones. I can't think. You going to be all right? She stroked my ankle. I don't think so. I cupped her hand with my own. Even gentle Mira had left me suffocating for a year after she was born. I sank in guilt, confusion, fear. How unlike the other mothers I seemed to be. How could I have not kept track of my bleeding? For months now, I had been wretched with mourning, my mind like spiderlings bursting from their egg sac, scattering in all directions. Forgetting what I was doing, even when I was doing nothing. I willed myself to bleed. I spat a thick scum of mucus. Look, Mira pried a rock from under one of the tree's roots. It was gray with a small white center, like a nipple or a flower. I bring in house? Our damn house. I walked the length of every room every day, with Mira following, sleeping, slung on my back, hip, or chest. I treaded the wooden floors of our scythe-shaped home. When Chien and Sori returned from school, I made dinner. When Chizu returned from work, I made more dinner. When I felt as though my mind would disappear, I ate or walked or stared at the sky through the leaves of our one lonely tree. I didn't allow myself to think about him. I was like a mouse in an earthen jar, crawling up sloped, impossible walls. What if I ran away right now? I pointed to the roads beyond the stone wall. What would you do if I left Mira? She rolled the rock between my toes, up my foot. Where are you going? I'm hungry. I wanted to cry and scream and burn the fear that roiled inside me. The air felt all wrong, too thin or too thick for me to breathe. I picked up Mira and threw her stone into my vomit. I'm going to tell you a secret. She smiled like an idiot child and grasped my nose. I think I'm pregnant. The morning Kyungwon had left, I returned from my search to find Chisu waiting for me at the front entrance. He looked hungover and miserable. As I approached the hem of my hanbok muddy, my feet bare, he turned away from the embarrassment of me, unmoored. Have you seen Kyungwon? I asked. Did you see him this morning? I stared at Chisu's twitching mouth. His eyes slid over mine, refusing to catch the blurred ankles, ears, silhouette of the man who was my husband. He didn't speak, and I realized he knew. I waited for him to drag me by the hair to call me a whore. I would laugh at him until he released me. Why was it unthinkable for me when he slept with other women whenever he desired? He came home smelling of their scent, their lipstick smeared on his ears, the back of his neck, along the seams where he couldn't see but the wife could. I stared at him and readied myself. Chizu looked beyond me, his shoulders raised, as if there was something worth seeing in the distance. Kyungwon left, some sort of emergency, he told me this morning. I searched his face. What kind of emergency? How the hell should I know? I tried to think. I didn't understand. My face crumpled and a small gasp escaped my mouth, my body revealing too much. I pressed a hand to my eyes. Chizu cleared his throat. The girls are hungry. I need to go to work. I'll see you this evening. I nodded and tried to will myself to walk back into our house. I took a few steps, forcing my feet to rise and land, but I couldn't help myself. I grabbed Chizu's shoulder. Is he returning soon? What did he say exactly? I need to find him. I turned toward town, letting go, hurrying again, lifting my skirt to run. Chizu yanked my arm with his thick, stout fingers. Anger fired his cheeks, mouth, and eyes until he looked right at me. Did something happen last night? I tried to rearrange my features into a look of contempt, except my body didn't feel like my own, the fear slippery in my throat. What do you mean? I asked. I'm not an idiot. He shoved me into the stone wall, his hands grinding my shoulders, pinning me. I couldn't breathe how hard he pushed until I felt all the bones in my back, a long curved spine he could break. He wanted to hurt me and was scared of what that meant about me, us, Kyungwon. Don't lie to me, Hemi. What did you do? I laughed as hard and loud as I could. What are you talking about? I whipped his arm off me, both of us now heaving with fear. Sori was crying in her room. She said she was supposed to go hiking with him. That's why I'm asking. I rushed past him into the house. Don't walk away from me, he called. What kind of uncle leaves after making a promise like that? Jisoo followed me into our room. The stench of him was everywhere. I pointed at the brimming basin, at his acrid green vomit. You are disgusting. Thank you. Thank you. And now, introducing Bill Lychack.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm going to do something. This is a prop. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's. I'm going to do something maybe stupid. I'm going to read from a brand new book, the beginning of a book and the end of a book. So the first 4 pages and the last 4 pages. And then I'll fill you in the intermission, what happens in between. And Margot, you may recognize the last part because I sent an email to you about 10 years ago with the germ of this story. So thank you. And I've not read from this before ever, so if you see me wince, it's a good thing. I can still make it better. It's from a book called Cargill Falls. We once found a gun in the woods. True story. Me and Brownie, 2 of us walking home from school one day, 12 years old, and there on the ground in the leaves was a pistol. Almost didn't even notice. Almost passed completely by. Had to be the last thing we expected, gun all black and dull at our feet, Brownie almost kicking it aside like an empty bottle or little kid toy. But then we saw what it was for real and got those shit-eating grins on our faces. We looked back to make sure no one else was coming. Nothing but skinny trees and muddy trail in either direction, not even a bird chirping that we could hear. We held our breath to listen, everything so quiet we were afraid to move, whole world teetering as if balanced on a point. Late winter, early spring, and we picked whatever leaves and twigs from around the gun. We made a little nest for the thing, neither of us saying a word. No shine to the metal at all. No trace of kindness anywhere in this object. Just sharp lines and dark, hard edges. Soon we were poking it with sticks. We hunched close to read the stamp on the barrel, Colt Government Caliber 45, like we had any idea what any of this meant. We were just kids. Brownie, a big romp of a boy with straight across bangs and face full of freckles, and this mouse character, me, standing alongside with my ears and toothy smirk, the 2 of us there in the middle of the woods with a gun. What could go wrong? Brownie pulled his hand into his sleeve and slowly lifted the pistol as if from out of a fire. He dangled the gun by the handle. It seemed to absorb the light in a way that made me feel bad for us. We were doomed. We did not stand a chance. This, said Brownie, is seriously real. And still those dopey grins, him and me in total cahoots, as if already we were permanently linked by whatever this was going to be. Some part of us must have liked the idea of danger. In some way, we must have wanted to make the gun a story we could tell about ourselves. Brownie going back and forth with the pistol under my nose. Let me see it, I told him. Brownie teasing me with the pistol, holding it delicate and careful. I stood with my hand open until he stopped and lowered the gun to me. My arm tugged down with the weight, that solidness so much more satisfying than anyone could have ever explained. The fit just so perfect in the hand. Years from this place, a lifetime away from these boys, and still I can't help but wish I could reach down and somehow lift the gun away from these two little idiots. Give them baseball practice or trumpet lessons. Somehow linger them back to the playground after school with friends. Wish I could make a nice little train set of their town. Cargill Falls, Connecticut, circa 1980. Its old mills and tired little worker houses, its churches and sidewalks and cemeteries. The grocery and package stores, that constant hint of potato chips in the air from the Frito-Lay plant in the next town over. If I could, I'd put them anywhere but the woods that day. I'd set those boys out by the train station, figurines throwing rocks at freight cars going by. I'd wander them home through a kind of busy town, give them bikes to ride, whisper down to them, "Get out of here already." That would be me rustling the maple and oak leaves, just enough to spook these kids away. Not like they'd have listened, of course. Not like they'd have been able to hear a single word. All the iron filings would line up on that one magnet of gun for them. And yet there were still so many things a pair of boys might have done different at this point in the story. We could have gone straight to the police. We could have called my mother at the department store where she worked. They'd have to page her over the intercom. She'd need to make her way past the registers with this fear growing in her that the worst had happened. We could turn that fear of hers into something tangible, something more than just credit for being good. We could use the gun to get something equal to the relief she'd feel when she knew we were safe. Yet with this raw weight and power in our hands, we must have no longer wished to be smart or nice anymore. We wanted to use the gun. We needed to shoot something. It was as plain and obvious and stupid as that. For whatever reason, it seemed a thing required. Otherwise, we'd have long since started for Brownie's father at CLMP, Connecticut Light and Power, the two of us finding Mr. Brownell in one of those big maintenance stations, man up to his elbows in some kind of engine or generator. We'd have approached all timid and shy, awed by this half-dim cathedral of machinery, the man annoyed at first, interrupted at work like this, but such an obvious triumph it could have been, though we must not have wanted to shine in any such way. Because we never went to his work, never went looking for him down at the Elks or the Knights of Columbus, never waited for him at the top of Addison Street. He'd have arrived to us sooner or later, that rattle of utility truck in the dusk, Brownie's father coming home, pulling up to the curb, saying, "What are you two numbnuts doing out here?" So that's the first few pages. The narrator says something like this, just for explanation. Pound for pound, our gun was the absolute perfect thing to find, scary like an animal, scary like an urge. Worse things would happen in our lives. We would think worse and say worse and do worse and be worse in months and years to come. But the pistol was our first worst thing. And this also happens within the first 15 pages of the book. And then I'll skip ahead. Some 30 years later, one of us would take his own life in a motel room, while the other would end up doing what exactly? Am I here to honor these kids? Am I trying to betray them even more? Who knows? But I'm riding home on a train, Pittsburgh to Harrisburg to Penn Station, hours of Pennsylvania farms and forests and little towns, an occasional barn or tree holding the eye. And I keep thinking about the gun we found as kids, as if this alone could explain everything that followed for us, including his wife calling with the news, saying there'd be a service at the Elks, asking if I could be there to say something for him. They'd found Brownie at the Comfort Inn and Suites in Killingly off Adwagon Crossing. It could have been anywhere. Just one of those anonymous hotel rooms, except for that constant smell of potato chips, and except for the fact that he was close enough to walk home to his wife and daughter in one direction, and close enough to walk to his mother and father in the other. He had his pill crusher with him. He had vodka, limes, his whole package in a grocery box. No gun involved, no blood like that, no violence. Just him lying half naked on a bathroom floor, his body curled around the toilet, bloated and pale, his face like bread in water. All right, so the rest is a romp. The kids have, a bunch of kids with a gun. I mean, what could be better? So they have a day and a half. They pick up their friend Crawford. Unfortunately, they pick up a dog, Barkley, Lady Barkingham. But they have an entire day, and the proof is here. There are pictures. It's a father-son story. It's a mother-son story. It's a friendship story. And it carries all the way through the day, the ramifications of that day, and then the reunion back at the Elks Club. Or sort of, one would hope. It's not anything like it, but it's that scene in The Dead, that big party scene. So there's a big party scene after the narrator sort of thinks that he fucked up screwed up, his eulogy for his friend. So this, and I should say this, my best friend did commit suicide about 4 years ago, and this is like an attempt to make amends in a William Maxwell sort of way. So just imagine that this comes at the end of the book, after all this. But before anything bad can happen, before the gun, before the dog, before all the crap that would come cluttering into this life, there are these kids out on the pond. It's winter vacation, no school, yet so cold, and my friend is on his way to my house. I'll watch for him to appear along the cemetery wall. My mother has stretched cellophane over the windows, the plastic making it feel as if the house is going blind. Everything blurry as I watch from the kitchen for Brownie. We're on our way to the pond. We are 10 years old, and the air slips straight through my coat, our boots crunching over the frozen grass of the cemetery, hockey sticks and skates over our shoulders. The day will be, in its own way, absolutely perfect. Not a cloud in the sky, no snow on the ground, everything vivid, everything sharp and close and clean in the light, the whole world crystallized. It's the kind of day that makes you feel you've been missing something, missing just how precise and profound every detail can be if only you can open your eyes. There's a taste of pines toward the back of the cemetery and voices in the distance, a hint of wood smoke, and the most unbelievable ice on the pond, silvery white in the sun, smooth as a mirror. The ice is flawless. No ruts, no cracks, kids out there playing tag. It's pristine and beautiful. You can hear the blades, the strokes like long sheets of paper being torn. And there's a campfire going, a circle of logs and stones where we change into our skates. Brownie has those skates with the quick release clasps, so he's on the ice first, him gliding out there all smooth and graceful. He can do anything he wants on blades. Forward, backwards, edges sharp as scissors, while my own laces take forever to tighten, even with that little metal hook I carry. I'm still getting ready when Brownie comes back to dump his coat by the shoes, his bangs pinned with sweat. A bunch of us discovered that the brook feeding into the pond has frozen. There's a couple of open patches you have to walk around, but deeper into the woods, the little stream is pure glass. This is us flying past the trees. It is us as wolves on the hunt, 7 or 8 in a pack, whole string of us slicing through the forest. Sometimes there's a false floor of glazing over the real ice, a loud electric sizzle like we're riding trolley wires, a rain of sparks cascading behind, and it's glorious. Small licks of talc swirling down through the shafts of light. We howl to the woods. We jump a fallen tree. Openings of dark water appear at the fast-moving drops in the stream, and we get down on our bellies and dip our faces to drink. The water so crystal cold and satisfying, flecks of gold in the bottom gravel, that mentholated cool on our mouths as we skate deeper into the woods. I'm not half as fast as everyone else, all of them better on skates, so it's fine to let Brownie and the rest of them pull away. It's fine to be alone in the woods. There are stone walls out here, which means this was all once cleared. There's a brick chimney standing in the middle of nowhere, kind of spooky, kind of haunted. An open well waits like a trap. We all know these things. We were born to this place. It's completely ours. No one will ever appreciate it better. I coast on my skates, slow and easy, and eventually I stop and lie down on the brook. It's a glass-bottom boat under me, faint circuitry of water burbling under the surface, sunlight falling like coins through the trees. I numb my cheek against that burn of brook and watch the flow of weeds underneath, the long green hair of a girl in the wind. In all my time on earth, this is what it is to feel alive on a good day. The whole universe full and beautiful and worthy of awe. Everything will be good in this moment, including me, including all of us in this place together. You can never be sure how long such a moment will last, but I'll take lying on that stream for just a little more. Why not? Who can stop me? I can lie here forever, just waiting for the gradual sound of skates coming back to me. Sharks, sharks, sharks. It's Brownie skating bigger and bigger toward where I am. Who else could it be? That shearing gets closer, Brownie in the woods moving fast and happy and full of confidence, his face flushed and bright, this boy with his whole life in front of him. It's from here. This is the spot from which I'll want to start over. Brownie's still scrawny compared to what he'll become. Neither of us even close to filling out our bodies. And me, his best friend in the world. There I am, just grinning from the middle of the stream. That fine spray of ice as he stops within an inch of my life. Brownie saying, "Isn't this all so amazing?" Thank you. Please welcome Leona Sevick.
Thank you, Sewanee. This is my second time on the mountain, and there are just so many people to thank. The Adams, Gentle Bee, and also Robbie, our yoga teacher. I think she's been keeping me alive, actually. So, I should also say that I've had some of the finest teachers here at Sewanee, and that is a gift. So thank you. I'm going to read a couple of poems from my collection, and then I'll read some new poems from my manuscript. The book is called Lion Brothers, and I'm going to read the title poem. The title comes from the name of the factory where my mother worked for almost 30 years. My mother is a South Korean immigrant, and as with many immigrants, when she came to America, she had very limited language skills, and still does. Lion Brothers. Sometimes they sent her home early, her hand bandaged tight where a needle had pierced her. Home from school, I found her curled on the floor, watching. She woke early to put on her face before we could see it for what it wasn't, round and smooth and yellow. Her legs tucked under her, she held the mirror in her tiny hand and painted on the jungle colors, blacks and blues. At the factory, she tied tools around her waist, slimmer than any boy's, though her arms were knotted in muscles. She climbed up beside the men, 4 feet above the ground, on their vibrating monsters, machines that worked like animals. Like pieces of thread cut from the loom and dropped clean, their words gathered around her feet. This next poem, folks of a certain age will recognize this television show. And it's a prose poem. I'm going to read it quickly. It's one of those, I liked Edgar's word yesterday, a tumbling poem. Chink. In the 4th grade, Billy Morton calls me a chink, and at first, I think it's because he sees my mother sitting quietly in the last row behind all the other mothers on back-to-school night, her black ink hair down to her waist, a curtain to everyone whenever she bends her head. But Billy Morton is always watching Kung Fu, and even though David Carradine doesn't look Chinese and isn't supposed to, people call him Chink, and Billy Morton wants to try it out on his own tongue, to push it forward with his breath, to feel how it tastes leaving his mouth. And I love words too, so I say, "You're a Chink." And his face folds in on itself, and he starts to cry. And Sister Regina points her long witchbone at me, all blue in the face. "Do you know what that means?" And I say no, but I know what it means. It means I can make you cry anytime I want. I'm glad you laughed. Sometimes people don't laugh. It's meant to be funny. This next poem features my father. My father is a retired state trooper. He was a policeman for many years. As with many jobs, this one changed him, and it changed us too. Gun safe. My father wore a gun on his ankle wherever he went, even to church. I told you it was because of his job, because he never knew when he'd have to save a life or to take one. He taught me how to disengage the safety, how to steady the surprising weight of any gun in my hands while I breathe out slowly, pull the trigger, listen for the explosion, and feel the kick without blinking. The smell of gun oil as familiar to me as coffee. I said, I never want one in my home. We should live without one because others say they can't. I am alone, and the house, ordinarily as quiet as old bones, comes alive. The dog barks at no one and nothing as he stares into his reflection on the paneled windows along the sides of the front door. And the shadows that the hall tree stamps on the floor make me feel like there's someone standing there, even though I know there isn't. The code to the gun safe is in my head, burned there by years of knowing the digits of your birthday, the year, the month, the day your mother pushed you into this world. It's a dangerous gift, knowing what others want. Not the things they say they want, but what is hidden in the dark, deep pulse of blood, tucked into the heavy folds of muscle and complex valves, where no one ever looks. I have been writing some ekphrastic poems, so I thought it was appropriate that I read a couple, and this is from my new manuscript. It features an object in a museum in South Korea, and I guess the best way to describe it is an ancient sleep aid. I'll call it that. Bamboo wife. If one bright day you find yourself moving through the rooms of the Jeju Folklore Museum, you might pause at the domestic exhibits, wonder at the strange, closed basket as wide as a drum and as long as a yardstick. They call it Bamboo Wife, and carefully printed signs tell you that in warmer months, men would wrap their arms and legs around her cage body to sleep, her ribs free from flesh, the air moving through her to cool the sleeper. Perhaps you think this is a strange marriage. The wife, stiff and silent, her spouse breathing into her the stale air of sleep, arms locked in a tight embrace around nothing. Where has she gone, living wife? Out to the paddy field in search of a soft breeze, the cold water cupping her feet as she reaches for the sky. Actually, I should say thank you to Alicia and to Charles, who gave me an assist last year with that poem, so thank you. This is in a series of poems I like to call I'm a Bad Mother poems. My daughter loves when I read this one. Dirt move. She calls it a dirt move, my habit of starting another conversation when she's in the middle of hers. It seems I can't pretend that I'm interested in the life of this 12-year-old girl, even one who's funny and bright and has a big tooth smile that slices my heart at unexpected times. When she first said it, I added insult to her injury by asking if she'd heard this from some clever boy at school. "You think I'm not smart enough," she screamed, justly. And I knew she had me dead to rights. I had failed her in some way better mothers do not fail. I think when I'm returned to dust, she will remember this. This is another ekphrastic poem, thanks to John Tribble and Allison Joseph for publishing it in the Crab Orchard Review. This is a place that I visited many times. Some of you maybe have visited this place as well. It's very special. Doll's House, Provincetown Museum. Walk through the giant open jaws of the blue whale, back toward the stunned faces of the china-headed dolls wearing Victorian clothes and clutching real leather purses to find the house that's the size of a small gas stove. Set on a 3-foot platform so you can peer into its windows, point at its tiny fixtures and the books with real and separate pages. This house glows with a softened light that draws us closer. Pressing a cheek against the wooden siding, your nose to the windows, you'll discover thick plastic panels shielding its orifices and rebuffing our fingers, the pinchers and pads that long to probe everything. The hurricane lamp, half the size of a pinky, the lovingly quilted coverlet, the perfectly placed cup and saucer no one uses anymore. What dreadful thing has happened to this family? Some hard truth erupting among them on an otherwise quiet evening, driving them out, inviting the transparent barrier that makes it impossible to return. And then my last poem is Johns Hopkins Hospital at the corner of Orleans and North Broadway. In the car, you take a deep breath. You're leaving her here, drains protruding from her jaw and thigh, dried blood caking her tongue, eyes following you to the door. You're headed home where you'll fall into bed and sleep the dreamless sleep of dread and heartache. At the corner of Orleans and North Broadway, a girl steps in front of your headlights like she's walked onto a stage, her greasy blonde hair framing the good bones in her face and the eyes glistening with opioid light. She is dirty, but the track pants and t-shirt look like they were once clean, once worn by the short redhead you teach who rolls out of bed and into her chair 5 minutes late every day. Clean hair pulled back into a top knot, sleep crumbs still gathered at the corners of her green eyes. Because you're slower than usual, because you've spent these last days folded into waiting room chairs, making good news out of bad, and listening to the private tragedies of strangers, you don't look away in time to avoid the gaze. The darkened teeth that once wore braces, the slight frame that has been violated in ways too gruesome to fathom. The red light is endless. And so you rest your forehead on the steering wheel, for you don't know how long, until you hear a soft tapping on your hood, and the girl is pointing to the light that's now green, and you drive on. Thank you very much.